This is a detailed overview of our 1989 911 964. Very special car for a few reasons, some of which are specific to this car and what we've done to it that makes her somewhat special. But she is a 964, and that in its own right makes her very special, and a lot of what I'm going to be covering is going to hopefully give you a context of what it is that I mean by that in terms of why they're so special. So the 964 is in fact the most rare, or the rarest, of all the 911s in terms of series. A lot of people don't realize that. So just in terms of numbers, just to give you context, Porsche claimed that they produced 65,500 964s. There's a bit of debate about that online. Some people claim as low as 54,000 based on unique VINs that have been identified. But let's use the number of 65,500. Now for context, the number of F series, which is the iconic original 911, that ran from kind of the mid 60s through to 73. The numbers there were 81,000. The numbers of G series are 190,000. And then you get to the 993 that came directly after the 964. And then we're looking at numbers of, believe it or not, 69,000, which is still materially more than the number of 964s produced. Then beyond that, the 996 that came in at 170,000. And then the numbers start to really run. 997s, 213,000. And then the 991s came in at 233,000. So just to kind of put numbers into context of the numbers of 911s that are out there, split by the respective series. And the 964 is, without question, the rarest of the lot. So I find that particularly interesting, given the fact that they are let's say, pretty much also the target for a lot of the rest of the mod industry, and we're going to get into what that means in a second in a little bit more detail. But first, let's talk a little bit about this car specifically. She's an 89, as I mentioned. She's a coupe. So let's put that into context, by the way, which is the number of coupes, the 964 coupes. Around 38,000 in total were coupes, the balance being Targas, Cabriolets, and a few special editions like the Speedster. But of those coupes, between 85 and 90% of them were left-hand drive. So this is a right-hand drive model. So to put that into perspective, we're looking at approximately 4,500 right-hand drive coupes. And with only 4,500 right-hand drive coupes in the market, of that, only a portion of them were Carrera 4s, which I'll also get into in a second. This is roughly one of 2,000 in total right-hand drive Carrera 4s in the market. So kind of just to put some perspective to those numbers, we're looking at a car of which there is one of 2,000 roughly. The latest, most limited the most current special edition that Porsche's got is the ST, and the ST has got 1,963 I think units on the market. So here you're looking at a car which is certainly, I'm using stats to my advantage here, and I guess I could tell, as they say, you can use statistics to back up pretty much any argument. But I think I just want to kind of hit home the fact that the 964 is, from a numbers point of view, a rare car. Okay. Next thing, let's talk generally, and how this talk's going to go is there's going to be a drive in the car, and a lot of the let's call it the points that I'm going to make, in fact, will be from the car. And there'll be two types of drives, more leisurely and then slightly more performance oriented. So let's talk about some of the generic points around the 964 first, because I think that will give everybody quite a good overview of what makes them somewhat unique. Okay, we're going to take two drives in the car. The first is going to be relatively leisurely, and the next one a little bit more high performance, to talk about the different experiences of driving this car, and broadly the 964 series as a whole. I think the key thing that I'm just wanting to stress, or rather cover rather, is how it is that a 964 feels, generally speaking, for those that might be interested, and then talk about some of the things which we've done to this car which maximize elements of that feeling. Okay, so first thing, what it feels like to drive a 964, and this is in leisurely driving. And there are 3 or 4 things I'm going to point out which are quite distinctive about the 964. First thing is, they feel a lot more solid. I don't know how best to use a word other than solid at this stage. They feel solid and planted. But that, I think, has got to do with some very important sensory feedback that's coming through to you from the car. The first thing is that just acoustically or audibly speaking, the car is quieter than the earlier models or the generations that preceded. It's got a lot to do with the amount of insulation that's sitting inside the cabin. There's a lot more foam built into, in fact, the kind of the inner recesses of the cabin. The car is quieter. So I'm not saying that it's better or worse. It's lovely to hear the engine note, and you definitely hear the engine note, but that's the first thing you'll pick up. It's quieter, it's more comfortable, and that's wonderful from a certain, let's call it, perspective. The other thing is that the actual drive, the car is planted. Now that's fundamentally got to do with the change in the design of the suspension components within a 964. So the torsion bars come out, and the way in which this car kind of rides effectively is on a set of coilover suspension. So there's a coiled spring inside of which sits a shock absorber, and you can kind of adjust both the ride height as well as the stiffness of that ride to within a millimeter, give or take, and that then translates into a different feel for the car. Coilover is most certainly kind of the better design makeup for a high performance car. It doesn't mean that the torsion bar design of the early cars is in any way not good. They're great, but coilover, you feel it in this car. It is planted, and you get a lot of benefit from that coilover design. In this case, with our car, or this car, we've taken that up a notch or two. So we've got higher performance springs, we've got a higher performance coilover setup, which allows us to not only change the ride height of the car, but the stiffness regardless of the ride height, based on our choice of springs and so on. So we've got a car here that's got a really good stiffness to it, in terms of how the corner weighting works. Corner weighting referring to not only the ride height of the car, but in fact the respective weight on each wheel of the car, and we get that down to an absolute, kind of, frankly, a few grams. So coilover suspension, planted feel, that's what happens with these cars. You're going to feel that immediately. Then I guess in terms of steering, let's talk about steering for a second. Very solid steering, slightly heavier than the previous generations. The reality is that the Carrera 4 even has got heavier steering than the Carrera 2, and that's actually because of the traction that's being generated by the front wheels. So there's an amount of power going through all the way through to the front wheels, and the benefit of that for you is that obviously you get a lot more traction in the front of the car. We'll talk about that when we take some fast corners in the second drive. But you will also, and this is a heads up for somebody, when you get into a Carrera 4 and give it a feel, don't think that the steering is heavy because there's some inordinate amount of weight in this car that the Carrera 2 doesn't have. The difference is relatively insignificant. It's about 100 kilograms in total between the 2 and the 4. It's actually because there's traction that's coming through the front wheels, which is obviously translating into just how much of a feel comes into the car. But yeah, so that's the drive. In this case, we've specifically kind of chosen a Porsche Momo classic steering wheel. I'm always a little bit torn as to whether we should or shouldn't fit these wheels to some cars. I feel it suits this car because there's a high performance concept to this car, which has got with lightweight seats. We'll get to those in a second. We've got more power coming out of the motor. We've got some transmission upgrades, which we'll also get to. And in that case, I felt that the steering wheel suits. We've got, for example, a 964 Cabriolet coming out, which is a lot less about performance, and as a result, I've kind of opted to not fit one of these to that, and I think the original wheel looks just very good on its own. So the feel of the car in terms of its driving, the suspension, the acoustics, the net result is that the 964s feel very different to the previous generations, and in fact, however, very different as well to the next generation, the 993. The proportion of this car is still identical to the early 60s models. So what was designed by the factory back in the 60s, same piece of glass. A lot of people may or may not know this, but the doors are the same size, the glass is the same size, the dash is fundamentally exactly the same proportion that it was 30 years before the launch of this car. And that's what I find very important about the 964, which is it is the last of the air-cooled 911s that is still the shape and proportion of the original 911. And that feel inside the cabin is real. A 993 feels different. It doesn't feel worse or better. It's rounder, its knobs are bigger, the glass has got a different rake in the front, the proportions are slightly different. It's a beautiful car in its own right. This is the 964, that is the very last of the iconic 911 design, and that there's something to be said for that. And I believe that a lot of let's call it the appeal of the 964, of which I believe we're still very much in the foothills of, actually lies in that fact. It is the last of the truly iconic initial original 911s, and you feel it. Okay, you've now got a fairly good idea of kind of what 964s have to offer generally. Let's now talk about this car specifically, and then we're going to take it for a spirited drive. Okay, the 964s are roughly, well, off the showroom floor, they would have weighed 1,450 kilograms. Not a light car per se, but 1,450 kilograms, pushing out roughly 250 horsepower off the showroom floor. They are great to drive, as I've mentioned. Now, how you get the most out of a 964, which is exactly what this was about, and we have an even more extreme example of that, which we're building at the moment. But my advice, or rather how it is that we've approached this project, is that we've kind of focused in on how to get the most out of a 964, given what it is that a 964 is good at. And they really are wonderful, wonderful cars to drive. So let's just talk then about some of the key obvious things just from an aesthetic point of view, which you're going to see in the drive to come. These are our carbon Recaro seats. So they are a Recaro pole position seat with a kind of a visible weave. They take quite a bit of weight out of the car. We'll talk about the actual benefit of these seats when I go driving. The car also has a lightweight flywheel and clutch, which is from an RS spec car. It's got a unique wheel, not a unique wheel, but it's got a Porsche wheel, steering wheel, which is a Momo, classic Momo kind of collaboration with Porsche themselves, which gives you a smaller diameter, which gives you a much tighter driving feel. And what we've got in the rear, let's get there for a second, is of course the 3.6 litre motor, which all of the 89s would carry. We did nothing in terms of changing the displacement of this vehicle, so we didn't make the motor any larger in terms of its displacement, but of course it was rebuilt in full. So this motor fully, like there are other videos that cover the detail of the rebuilds, which we do. There's no real nut or bolt which is left unturned, as it were. But this motor is 100% stock, really aside from effectively two things. There is a little bit more air that we've got coming out of her, and that's basically just a slight revision to the muffler design and how the headers work. Minor, minimal changes, just getting a little bit more air through, so she's a little bit more throaty. And secondly, there is a performance chip which we use, which is there to do a few things for us, taking advantage of some slightly later technology, which is now available to us, where we can kind of manage this motor slightly more efficiently in terms of spark. And that also allows us to take full advantage of the lighter RS spec flywheel and clutch. So she's a lot easier to drive when one uses that chip. But here's an important point. That motor is already sitting at high compression. They're 11.4 odd compression. Making the motor a higher compression isn't really going to do much for you and can present other problems. There are definitely ways in which one can get a lot more out of these motors, but keeping them in fundamentally stock guise, which is what this car was about, we believed was the right way to go. It makes the car infinitely and kind of comfortably drivable. So what else have we got to talk about? Let's talk about the elephant in the room, these wheels. Just to clarify matters, that is a Porsche wheel. So the rims on this car are in fact the design 93 wheel. They were designed in 93, made available from 93 into 94. So are kind of formally a 993 wheel. But the last year of the 964 overlapped with the introduction of the 993, and then quite a few people at the time who were buying 964s were able to then fit these wheels. So, but let's talk about these wheels and what we've done to them. They're beautiful wheels. They're a lot lighter, incidentally, than the preceding Cup 1 wheel before them, and that's why we used them. But let's first talk about the aesthetics. We take a standard Cup 2 wheel and we pop it onto a 3-axis lathe, and we actually cut away the negative material. So we will cut away a few millimeters of aluminium to produce what is a kind of a Fuchs pattern onto that wheel. I could lie and say it's for weight saving. It's not for that at all. It's purely for the aesthetic, let's call it charm, of having a unique wheel on a vehicle that is, you know, somewhat unique already in its own right. And that's kind of a treatment which we offer, or an option which we offer our clients, which is, you know, to have a unique wheel. But the reality is that they are a stunning 17-inch wheel that really, I think, does the best, or does a lot for how a 964 looks. But anybody that kind of is fairly familiar with 964s will know that the 964 is known for a Cup 1 wheel, which is a beautiful wheel in its own right, absolutely, no question. The only challenge with it is that it's a relatively heavy wheel. So the benefit of using a Cup 2 wheel is in fact quite substantial. So to give you an idea, the rear, well, let's talk about the front first. The front wheel between a Cup 1 and a Cup 2, the Cup 2 is roughly 300 grams lighter, whereas the rear wheel between a Cup 1 and a Cup 2 come to, you know, 1.6, just under 1.7 kilograms lighter. That's now per wheel. So by moving from a Cup 1 to a Cup 2, we're saving roughly 4 kilograms in unsprung weight. And unsprung weight, for those that aren't familiar with the concept, is an important concept to understand. It's basically the amount of weight on a car that's not sitting within the sprung mass. So it's rotating in this case, which is around the wheels. And in fact, the value or the effect of any weight saving on unsprung weight is in fact in most cases multiplied by 2. So just having a 4 kilogram lighter set of wheels in fact gives you the net benefit of roughly 8 kilograms of weight saving in the car. But obviously you realize you're having to now kind of spin these wheels around, and as you accelerate, you've got to kind of get rid of that inertia of a heavier or a lighter wheel. So a lighter wheel gives you very real benefits in terms of acceleration, in terms of braking, even in fact in terms of cornering, fuel efficiency, and even wear and tear. So we've got color to talk about. So what color is this car? Now I've got a view as well that we're seeing kind of a resurgence in metallics. The flat colors, as in non-metallic colors, have had a really good run based on kind of, let's call it, the resurgence of interest in the kind of the more classic vehicles and the bright trim and so on. Now we're starting to see kind of G series coming in, and certainly the 964 is going to, I think, kind of grow quite fast, which we'll talk about as we go for the drive. This car is a metallic color, or metallic paint. It is in fact it's not one of our bespoke mixes. This is a Porsche color. It is malachite green, and it is a metallic. It's quite able to show you all the detail of that, but let's kind of get in here. We chose malachite green for a few reasons. One, it is, in my opinion, an understated green, in as much as, and not that all our cars are green, we obviously quite like that hue, and we do quite a few cars in that hue, but it's quite understated. And because this car is relatively sporty in terms of its both kind of mechanical makeup and its aesthetics, certainly amplified somewhat by the wheels, I wanted to get that balance back. And the client and I had a lot of discussions about this, which is, I'm always far happier with a car that's slightly understated versus overstated in terms of its aesthetic. And instead of having a particularly, let's call it, impactful, kind of odd or unusual color, I wanted to go for something that was in fact recognizably Porsche. From that we kind of worked through a number of samples, and I settled on malachite green. It's also a color which is used very successfully on the 992 GT3 RS, and there's a spec that I believe works particularly well, or rather that I picked up from that, which is the relationship between the color of the car, the green, effectively the carbon, and the black details. So again, you know, color is very much a personal thing. What you do and don't like is really up to you. We take color very, very seriously. You know, we build these cars to our client spec. But if I look at that, and this is just, you know, if I kind of wear my design hat, there is something kind of fundamentally timeless about that combination of kind of green over tan, but a metallic green that's got elements of, or malachite's got elements of blue in it. Not that you can see the blue, almost an aquamarine. Timeless, and it's also very understated. So, you know, one can certainly, I don't know, take your daughter to the ball in this, if not be the daughter that goes to the ball in this, and come across, I think, as quite, let's call it elegant and understated. We take the term understated also very seriously. I would far rather have a car which whispers but says a lot. This is a car that shouts and no one really wants to listen to. So let's go and take a performance drive, have a look at how this car kind of behaves, given the various things which we've done to her to make a little bit more out of her, and then we'll come back and do a wrap-up. Okay, some spirited driving. The reason I want to kind of do this is that it serves as a really good way to kind of allow us to kind of point out the best way. Let me turn this off. The best way to kind of explain what aspects of the car we have specifically, let's say, kind of concentrated or condensed the experience of. So, the previous drive gives you a good idea of, let's call it the generic benefits or the feel of a 964, how it feels, how the suspension gives you feedback, how it differs from the G series. But there's something important to bear in mind when one talks about improving these cars. And there's this, I have a view on really respecting what it is that each of these series represent and what they give you. So the F series cars, the early cars, drive in a certain way. So trying to make them drive like a new car, to me, is a missed opportunity to really enjoy an early car. And then the G series cars, they drive differently to the Fs, and they've got a very hands-on feel to them, but yet with some of the let's call it the benefits of the later generation, the 964. But the point is that each generation has got a certain feel to it. Now, when we improve a car, to me the best thing we can do is in fact improve the things about a car which make that car unique to that model series, if that makes any sense. We can make any car faster, we can make any car lighter, we can change the color of any car to anything we want. But when you make a type of car try and mimic another car, I think that's an immediate fail in my opinion. And accordingly, maybe another way to explain, let's call it the reservations I have about resto modding, with obviously obvious exclusion to some brands which are doing very good jobs of building their own marks of the car. But resto modding broadly, to me, is just a kind of a process of taking one model and making it do what another does, and making it look like another, and making it drive like another. And that to me is not ideal for my personal taste. So, in the 964, what is it that we can do to a 964 that'll make it the very best 964 on the market? So that's the question which we're effectively asking ourselves. Let's get past this. And it comes down to roughly four things. Right, the first thing, Carrera 2 versus Carrera 4. There is a benefit to the Carrera 4, which is not just it's going to get you through the snow. It's going to enable you to enter corners faster and exit them sooner. It's going to provide you with traction that you don't have in a Carrera 2. The car is slightly heavier, roughly 100 kilograms, to manage all of the hardware that's running power from the back, through to the front. It's not simple hardware, but what you get as a result is the ability to have roughly 61%, in fact, in this case, of the power to the rear and roughly 29% to the front. And that 29% gives you grip. Now, what does that grip give you? And it's not just about being in the rain, and there's certain safety benefits. When cornering, and let's use the track as an example, how one drives at speed in a track is you will approach a corner as fast as you possibly can, and you will take your speed off in a straight line, because that's the optimum way to slow a car down that's going fast. You then will enter that corner not braking and not accelerating. You're allowing the car to take you into the corner, and you will, with any luck, clip the apex. If you come in too hot, you're going to miss that apex, or you might kind of understeer off into the side. But the point is that you're having to try and keep the car at its most optimum speed effectively to be able to get around the corner and exit it as fast as possible. Time is made in racing. Everybody thinks it's just racing on the straights. It's pretty much made in how fast you can exit a corner. So, if we're going to be exiting corners fast, how do we do that? And this is what happens with the C4, is you'll come into a corner, take off your speed on braking. I'll show you in a second how that works. And frankly, before you even clip the apex, because the speed of the car is slowing down sufficiently, you can gas it, because the traction on the front is going to pull that car into the corner. Front wheel drive racing cars are driven totally differently to rear wheel racing drive cars, especially if they have a limited slip diff. You can literally defy the laws of physics and gravity, and you can pull a car into a corner. So what I'm going to do is basically into the corner at speed a little bit more, let's call it a little bit faster than normal. I'm on a kind of an open public road, so I've got to be quite careful as to how I do that. So let me just get rid of some traffic. Alright, I'm going to take it a little bit faster than normal, but give you an idea of what it is that the four-wheel drive system allows you to do. So here we're doing roughly 140 km an hour in fourth gear. I indicate to turn left. I set up my corner, I'm in third, I get it into second, on the corner and on the gas. The car doesn't hesitate. It is just trying to kind of, let's call it, put as much traction as it can down, and off it goes. And it is effectively pulling you back into the line. Now, if that defies the classic feel of a 911, then so be it, because that's exactly how you want to be able to exit every single corner that you take. And quite frankly, even the two-wheel drive contemporary 911s carry so much tech in them to allow you to do that. To kind of there's an electronic brain making sure that you don't make an image of yourself. It kind of is driving the car in many cases for you. So it's not like there is some form of sacrosanct two-wheel drive experience which makes these cars what they are. It's a wonderful way in which you can leverage that all-wheel drive system. So, first thing, upgraded suspension allows us to get a little bit more out of the 4 setup, and that's an important thing. Second main change in this car is we have a lightweight RS spec clutch and flywheel. So what that comes down to is the motor obviously kind of, pistons fire, you get a certain degree of rotation. That rotation has to now be transferred to the wheels. How do you do that? Well, if you just attach the wheels to the motor, realize there is no rotating mass inside of that motor. They're just little pistons firing, and as soon as you were to put them under load, it will stall. So the role of a flywheel is to basically gain some continuous momentum and transfer that momentum, or the weight of that momentum, into the wheels, which allows you to basically, with minimal revs, take off in a car. The flywheel hence plays a very important role in terms of drivability of a car. But once the car is driving, you now want to have as much of that power in the motor transfer as fast as possible into the car, and hence the flywheel at that point is now actually in the way, because it's got weight in it, and if I accelerate the car, the motor, it doesn't transfer immediately out into the wheels. So a lighter weight flywheel, which then attaches to a clutch. The clutch in this case is slightly lighter than the flywheel. Both of them being lightweight allows you to basically get the motor spinning faster and transfer that power through to the wheels faster. There is an optimal balance for that. If you make them too light, the cars are difficult to drive. If you make them too heavy, they get a bit slow, but they become quite easy to drive. So the RS flywheel has got, Porsche engineers put it together, they should know, has got a really great balance in terms of that. So we've got an RS flywheel and clutch. I'll demonstrate it to you in a second just to give you an idea. The other thing we have, which I think the camera can see, is we've also got a fairly neat piece of kit by way of a short shift gear stick in a Carrera 4, which is fairly unusual. It isn't an off-the-shelf part. We have engineered a part which allows us to have a shorter throw in a Carrera 4. Not easy, based on, in fact, the makeup of this entire kind of Carrera 4 transmission, but a slightly longer stalk, in fact, with a shorter throw. And just to show you, look how, like, my hand can be on both the gear stick as well as the steering wheel at the same time. That little short bit of distance, sure, you might think, like, what's the real benefit of that in terms of time? It's just a degree of comfort, and I can get to the steering wheel and back to the gear stick in a shorter space of time, and I've got a short little bit of throw. It just adds to the experience. So, the shortest stubbier 964 standard
gear throw, it's all good. This is better. And it just makes that little feel, that little bit of kind of feel better. What else have we got? We've mentioned the fact that we've got a slightly narrower gauge steering wheel that gives you a slightly kind of more responsive drive. But very importantly, we also have lightweight Recaro carbon seats, or Recaro pole position style seats. We make the carbon, we make the seats. It takes out 10-12 kilograms out of the car, which of course is a benefit for, but the main benefit in fact is the fact that you are connected to the car. So when you're driving at speed, and this is a racing proposition, you're strapped in, you cannot move. The reason you're strapped in and can't move is really one, for safety, but more primarily in fact because when strapped in, what the car feels, you feel through your body. And that transfer of information allows you to make better decisions when driving. So if you're going into a corner, you're experiencing some understeer and the car's starting to slip out, the steering wheel will give you a certain degree of feedback, okay? But you won't know what's happening in the rear. Sure, different levels of drivers can feel cars in different ways. But if you're in a seat that is supporting all of you, and you're held snugly in that seat, and that seat has then got minimal amounts of foam, enough to be comfortable, but not some cushy couch, you feel the car. So if it starts to slip in the rear, you will feel it, and you will adjust almost inadvertently. So the seating, kind of a racing seat setup in a vehicle of this nature, it takes out some weight, and there is some benefit of that. But the main benefit is the fact that you can feel the car, and it makes you a better driver. Seating in a higher performance car is critical to the ability to drive it fast. Seating in a urban driving car that connects you better to the car and better to the road gives you more, let's call it feedback, and makes that drive better. Gonna go collect milk from the mall, do it in a seat like this, it's gonna be more fun. Drive 1,500 kilometers or 1,000 miles to the coast. Is it as comfortable? Well, interestingly enough, these seats are in fact even more comfortable, it would seem, than the standard ones because they're so supportive. But seating, lighter weight seating, shorter shifting, lighter flywheel clutch assembly, Carrera 4 setup with front traction, with kind of performance coilover, and that's the combination we've got in this car with a slightly smaller wheel. And that then, in our opinion, makes the most of a 964 for what a 964 is. And let's kind of give it a go. So that's an example of that's how fast the motor itself gains revs, but let's get that over to the flywheel. 6,000, 5,000, and we're off. We're what? There's one of a tire there. You're sitting at about 120 kilometers an hour, and fine. We got off the mark a little faster than, let's say, standard. So I would guess that this car originally pushed out 250 horsepower off the showroom floor. We've got a bit of a performance, let's call it, a bit of technology as well in that motor, which is helping us manage the lighter flywheel. It doesn't have any impact on the serviceability of this car. It's basically a chip by any other name. We've got a bit more air running through the motor. I would guess we've probably got in the region of about 10 to 15 horsepower, only 10 to 15 horsepower more, coming out of a totally rebuilt motor. So it's a fresh motor, but it's got all of that power going through to a lighter weight flywheel, and that then is allowing us to have this kind of really spirited drive. But let's understand where you feel that benefit. I'm now in, what am I, in fourth? I can get that speed straight the way through. Let's just kind of get through this corner. Oh, there's a bit of traffic. Notice I'm braking and then getting into the corners. Some twisties. This car feels, with respect, like a far more mechanical car than its date would allow you to think. This is a 90s car. The 90s, they were somewhat sedentary, to be honest. This car doesn't feel like that at all. It feels like a modern day classic car driving experience, and that's hard to achieve. So all in all, if we were to kind of look at the best way to build, it's so nice. And by the way, this motor's only got 940 kilometers of testing on it. But here I'm at 100 k's now. I'm hitting 120. I'm at 5,000 revs. Probably committing 1 or 2 moving violations. So let me slow down slightly. It is making the most of the 964. I've maintained for quite some time that there is something magic about these cars. And it's interesting how aesthetics gets in the way of people's perceptions. So five years ago, fine, the trend had already come, but let's say 8 years ago. 8 years ago, you couldn't give away a 964. And the reason for that was this: aesthetically, they didn't look old enough and they didn't look young enough. So they sat in this no man's land. But that was purely aesthetics. The underlying drivability of them and the benefits that they give mechanically were always there, but people would not appreciate them because aesthetics would get in the way, and style and taste would be the overriding factor. And that then led to people ripping off their bumpers and changing their fenders and trying to turn them into kind of early looking cars. And maybe just to give it some credit for a second, you know, the 964 was chosen, and still is chosen, interestingly enough, as the primary chosen base work for these resto mods. So why? Well, it's because it is the best that they ever were. Sorry, from a 911 point of view, it was the very best framework to work from. What's happening now, certainly in my opinion, is the aesthetics are moving toward the 964. So whilst there's very few of them left based on initial production numbers, and a lot of those have then been stripped out and turned into, you know, resto mods of sorts, I believe the value of these cars is going to skyrocket, certainly continue to increase, but I believe logistically increase. That's going to continue. And then when the resto mod industry broadly realizes that there are these amazing cars underneath these Technicolor dream coats that they've been put under with resto modding, I believe there'll be a trend in getting them back to look like 964s. And if I may say, I think there's a very good chance, we've got one example of it already, where the kind of the resto modding industry starts to focus on producing 911s that look like 964s. So Roof, for example, with the SCR is the best example of that. That's a car that's built full carbon, including the monocoque. So it's not actually based on a 964, it's an entirely new car that looks like a 964. Fantastic vehicle. It's a $1 million plus vehicle. Very nice thing, but it's an indication. So, you know, if you have a look at the likes of the Singers of the world, kind of the kingmakers, I guess, of the industry, they do a good job for everybody. I'm surprised that they focused on still making 964s now look like G series. Another discussion around the popularity of G series, but the second, which is coming, that the leading resto modders start making 911s look like 964s, these things are going to skyrocket. So here's my advice to anybody: is get one. You don't have to restore it. You don't want to, you can, and if you do restore it, do the very best job you can. My advice would be to keep it very much in a Porsche realm, which is what we do. We only use Porsche components. I think you'll retain its value in that way because they're now extremely valuable cars. Get it is my first set of advice. If you're going to get yourself all wound up in a knot about getting a Carrera 2 versus a Carrera 4, okay, cool, but maybe do a little bit more research and maybe drive one or two cars, or potentially drive a car that's been set up correctly as a Carrera 4 and just get a feel for what that means. And kind of there's a predisposition which I think is not in people's favor, and actually that's even applies broadly to the 964. There is an aesthetic predisposition to this vehicle that's been suppressed and only now is starting to bubble up, and that's really what I'm just trying to kind of push through. Is they are all wonderful. They are not better than a G series. They are not better than a 993, and vice versa. But they are a 964, and if you build them right, and you know how to drive them, and you can get the most out of that drive, you've got yourself a true classic vehicle that will never age. Okay, it will only get better. It will only get to have more demand, and yet offers the comfort, safety, and kind of performance and reliability of a contemporary vehicle, of which there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands more available, which obviously then affects the value of your investment.
Okay, just in terms of a wrap up, you've kind of heard about the generic benefits of 964s. I think as a series in their own right, given that they are the most, let's call it the rarest of the lot, it's just an absolute no-brainer that they are going to continue to grow, and they already have grown significantly in value, but they will continue to grow in value. They kind of are the epitome, in my opinion, of the iconic 911. I love them in their 100% original state. I have a personal car which is by and large original, and believe me, it's an absolute glorious kind of ownership experience. So as a whole, they're wonderful vehicles. Now, if we then have a look at what, if somebody wants to get hold of one, or somebody has one and we wanted to kind of make them slightly more special, what this car represents is let's call it an optimization of what it is that we think makes the 964 great, but focusing in on those elements that make it great. And there we've kind of practiced a fair degree of restraint, but we've done a hell of a lot in practicing that restraint. So we have done as much as we can to get a wonderful balance out of kind of the motor into the transmission, the drive feel. This is a car in which you can do many thousands, hundreds of thousands of kilometers, do it both comfortably, elegantly, etc. And I think this is what that is what this car really represents. And it's a good example of that, which is what is the very best 964 one can create. And I think it is something, whilst for this client specifically, it is exactly this. It is a car that will provide decades of enjoyment, and from an investment point of view, I think will only reward the owner kind of handsomely over the course of time.